Good morning, Peter Goertz. Can psychotherapy help me? No, psychotherapy is just for people who are psycho. No, psychotherapy can help anyone, or at least pretty much anybody. And there are different types of psychotherapy: cognitive behavioral, psychodynamics, supportive, and quite a few others. And what they focus on is changing thinking, beliefs, as opposed to necessarily changing external circumstances. I mean, that can help also, but the crucial thing is our beliefs. So our beliefs are what determine, to a very large extent, or maybe even entirely, our mood. So our external circumstances are secondary in the sense that they only secondarily affect our mood via our beliefs. Medications generally do not get to the roots of things, so you can take medications for depression, anxiety. They will not address what's underlying the depression and anxiety, and in general, depression and anxiety, or any mood issue, any psychological issue, does not come out of the blue. So you may be asking yourself, I've been repeatedly traumatized. Is psychotherapy going to be helpful for me? Am I too far gone? And pretty much always, in my opinion, the answer is psychotherapy can help, but it's an investment of time, energy, money. Quick example, there was a 19-year-old girl who was referred to me many years ago, and she'd been having very acrimonious interactions with her mother. She was very angry, but did not really admit that to herself, did not embrace her feelings, and instead she tried to ignore everything. And that was then that turned into a pressure cooker inside of her, and she started having panic attacks, really debilitating panic attacks, and that's why she came to me. And as soon as we talked about what was underlying these panic attacks, and this is a little bit unusual that it happened so quickly, but after one or two sessions, after talking about her anger towards her mother and the interactions with her mother that were underlying the panic attacks, after talking about those and becoming conscious of them, her symptoms resolved. So she no longer had panic attacks. So we all have our patterns, and those are that is what can be dealt with in psychotherapy, can be helped with psychotherapy. An example I've mentioned before is a little girl grows up in an alcoholic household. The father drinks alcohol, comes home every night, beats the mother in front of the children. And the little girl stands there every evening, terrified, sees her mother getting beaten. And gradually that turns into a belief that can even be unconscious or subconscious. And down the road, when the little girl grows up, she often ends up letting men like that into her life, men who are alcoholic, abusive, and if she gets married, divorces the first one, the second one may be the same again. So these things can create lifelong patterns or patterns over many years. So, like I alluded to before, beliefs are very connected with our mood, as opposed to external circumstances that are not necessarily directly connected with our mood. And our beliefs, for example, about ourselves can be very different from what people would see as facts or from what other people perceive about us. An example, again, another one I've mentioned before, is once, many years ago, I was stuck in an elevator, and it was only intended for 6 people. It was an elevator that 11 people were in, but it was only intended for 6 people. So we were like sardines in that elevator. And it was going downstairs from a discotheque around 2 a.m. in the morning when the discotheque closed, and a lot of people just crammed into that elevator, and it was one of the old elevators where the door swung out. So the elevator got to the ground floor, and because it was so heavy from 11 people being in there as opposed to the allowed or the intended number of 6, the door wouldn't swing out because the elevator hung too deeply and the door just could not swing out. And everyone obviously was in exactly the same situation, stuck in that elevator, but people's reactions were totally different. Some people started to panic, Other people got very angry, started kicking there was a little glass in the door, and other people started laughing. It was very different as far as people's reactions to exactly the same situation. And we were in there for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So it was interesting to see people's very different reactions to exactly the same circumstance. And another example of that is another example of beliefs being related to our experience, our mood, is if someone has bipolar disorder, they're manic sometimes, depressed sometimes, and when they're depressed, they can feel worthless, like a piece of garbage. When they're manic, they can feel on top of the world, like they can do anything. They have qualities that make them feel, that make them invincible. So they're the same person, but at different times they have very different experiences based on their beliefs about themselves, about the world. And these things can be worked on in psychotherapy. And another example is if someone as a child is being told by their father day in, day out, you're worthless, you're never going to amount to anything, that is essentially being marinated. The child then is essentially being marinated in a belief that they're worthless, or at least they're being told that, and that can become a belief that they're worthless, they're never going to amount to anything. And that child, even if they're very intelligent, may end up not even trying to go to college because they believe they're stupid, they're worthless, it's not going to be worthwhile to go to college because there's no point, they're worthless. So our beliefs definitely can influence our experiences, our life course, and that's the type of thing that can be worked on in psychotherapy, and that can be very useful. And what I just touched on, being told by one's father that one is worthless, or what I mentioned before, repeated trauma, that brings up other issues I can talk about in another video. For instance, resentment against parents, resentment, anger against abusers. But that's for another video. Thank you.